Welcome to the Save Childhood podcast with Jennifer McCarville. Because childhood has changed, but children have not. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Save Childhood podcast.
Hi, I'm Jennifer McCarville.
And I'm Nicole Dugan, and today we are going to be talking about all things animals. Animals in the classroom, animals at home, animals at your school, and why they're so important.
And just so fun.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So wonderful and soul-filling, and they just bring joy and smells, all the things.
Yes. Embrace it all.
Embrace it all.
Yeah, so let's jump in and talk about...
I'm ready.
I mean, we know that we have so many animals at our school.
Yes.
Now, before we list them all, we should tell you that we haven't always had all of these. We started with a few.
Yes.
And gradually, as our school has grown, we've added more. So if you're listening today and you're going to learn all the ways that animals benefit children, and you want to get started, it's okay to start small.
Oh, yes. I would encourage you to start small.
Yeah.
And we'll even give you some ideas about which ones to start with.
Yeah.
That might help you start small and easy.
Yes.
So, absolutely.
So on our campus, let's start with the large animals that we have.
Okay. So it's funny to start with the large ones because they were the last ones we got. So keep that in mind. But we have 2 alpaca, 2 sheep, 2 goats, 2 pigs, 2 bunnies that are outside in what we call the rabbitat. And we have chickens, which maybe aren't really large because they're bantam, which means miniature. And I prefer to get the small version of any animal, most animals, because then they're more proportional to the children. And one of the goals is to build the confidence in them to have the rapport with the animals. And if you have animals that are huge and overwhelming, and that can be counterproductive. And so those are our outside animals.
Yes.
Right? That's
yeah.
all of them.
Did you say the pigs?
The pigs.
2 pigs. Cooney pigs.
Cooney pigs. And those actually, those don't follow my general guideline of the smallest version we can. Cooney pigs actually can grow to be between 400 and 600 pounds. They are meat pigs, but not for us. For us, they're pets. But we chose them because they are docile and friendly, and they are really, honestly, my favorite pet we have. And I didn't expect that. But we got them when they were babies. So, they were about this big when they left their mamas and came to us. I know because I have a picture of me holding Helen. And they've grown. Now they're a lot bigger. But they were chosen intentionally, just like all the rest of our animals.
Yeah, they're incredibly smart.
So smart, and love a belly rub. And just love to interact with humans. So the children spend actually a lot of time, of all of our large animals, the children spend the most time with the pigs. I would say, well, the bunnies, the pigs, and then I would say the goats, because the goats can travel easily into other classrooms.
Right, on a leash.
On a leash, yes. So of our big animals, that's the way that has played out. We have animals in the indoor classrooms as well. Mm-hmm. And it's important that we have at least a few animals inside every classroom. We work really hard. I also want to be sure that we have an animal that the children can hold if at all possible, and maybe some animals that we just observe. So inside we have reptiles. We have a bearded dragon in one classroom. We have a small, it's brand new, so it will grow, but a turtle. And we have a tortoise that is a little bit larger, not a land tortoise like the huge ones. That's one of our indoor pets, so he's smaller. Hissing cockroaches.
Madagascar hissing cockroaches.
Right, very important. Mm-hmm. Not regular cockroaches.
No way.
No wings on these guys. And that's really important to me because I'm terrified of cockroaches. So I don't want anything surprising me in that way, flying at me or what have you.
Right.
So I waited a long time before we got hissing cockroaches, and I was convinced years ago by one of our grandpas. And so the children love them. They're one of the most cherished pets we have. The children hold them, they crawl on them, they build houses for them and obstacle courses, and it's amazing. Also inside we have snails, a rat, guinea pigs.
Mm-hmm.
We have there's another reptile. Oh, a Euromastix. I knew I was forgetting some little fella. I think that's all we have inside. Fish, absolutely. Fish, good
inside
option.
and outside, yeah.
Big variety,
Mhm.
intentionally a variety, so the children have lots of different animals to interact with.
Now, let's talk about this because you said you're not a big fan of cockroaches.
Right.
There are other animals that I'm not the biggest fan of either, but the children would never know that we don't prefer them. Talk about why that's so important.
So important. So, children come really loving animals. They're born to be curious about nature, and, animals just speak to children. And we know that in things like, neurodivergent children and therapies and things like that, animals, the interaction with animals is really, it's healing and beautiful. And so there's a calmness that animals bring. But there are animals that, for whatever reason, we either as adults are fearful of them because we don't understand them, or maybe we've been told by someone else to be fearful of them because they didn't understand them. Usually it's parents or adults tell you things about animals that they're afraid might hurt you. And they might say it in a way like, oh, snakes are horrible. You're going to get bitten by that snake and it's going to be bad. Stay away. Snakes are bad. And then we all have this anxiety about snakes or whatever it is. I know one of the main reasons I do not like cockroaches is because when I was in middle school, there was an episode of The Twilight Zone where there was this scientist who was like, everything was pristine white in his house, and he had on a lab coat, and so I guess that's why I think he was a scientist. I don't really know, to be honest, but what I do know is that entire place was pristine and beautiful, and then cockroaches started infiltrating it, and that's all I'm going to say because I don't want you to be as creeped out by cockroaches if you're not already. But they're my kryptonite. They've always have been. But it's really important that children never ever know that. We don't want to pass on our fears or our biases to the children. So even though we know that can happen, we talk a lot about that with the adults around and the adults who spend time in the classrooms. There are ways to avoid a particular critter or animal that maybe you're uncomfortable with. And there are other people on every teaching team that can step in. And so we just have a lot of conversations about not ruining any of these animals for the children.
Yeah, and I think that learning more about the animals can lessen fear.
Always. Fear is almost, well, I won't say almost always, but very, very often fear is based in ignorance, really. And that ignorance is not a bad thing. It just means not knowing. And so fear comes from not knowing or understanding something so many times. And it's really, really important for us in the way we educate the children and the way we live our lives to take the time to understand, to realize the beauty and the strength and the value of all things, really.
Yeah.
And so we want to be sure that we're acknowledging that as the adults who walk alongside the children, so we can give them a better opportunity to care for the animals in the world itself. And it's important for them to have these authentic interactions with animals, because if you don't have a relationship with something in nature, your heart isn't going to grow to protect it. And we need to be good stewards of the earth and, the trees and the flowers and the plants and the animals and everything that, we've been given in nature.
Yeah.
So that's why it's really important to us to have the animals.
There was one year in the cottage, which is our kindergarten, that I was teaching in, and we had a few children that were really nervous about bees. So we just started reading a lot of books about bees and sharing those facts and talking about them in hopes to lessen their fear. And we even went as far as to bring in a beekeeper, and he installed an indoor observation
hive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. An indoor observation hive, and that really changed the way children felt about bees. Mm-hmm. They learned how important they were. Then we kept the learning going with a pollinator garden. And so that's just one example of how learning more can really shift perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, those children all just kind of dealt with that fear based in the unknown, and also probably have heard people say, oh, that bee's going to sting you, you know, and realizing, you know, well, they're not all African hornets. They're not all, isn't that the one that attacks?
Yeah.
And so realizing that these bees are honeybees, and there are different varieties, but these bees play a very important role. And of course, now we have this lovely pollinator garden, and it's so great because in the springtime or in the fall, it's often full of bees and butterflies, and you walk past and everything just flitters around, and it's just a beautiful kind of magical thing. And we would miss so much richness in nature and so many beautiful experiences that are soul-filling without that respect of and learning about the bees. Brought all of that into the environment.
Yeah.
So that was a really incredible experience.
And one reason we have so many animals on our campus is it's part of the science, it's part of the curriculum for sure.
Sure.
But there are more reasons, one being the social and emotional development of the children. Can you talk about that?
Yes, absolutely. So we know that the social emotional growth of children is the primary area of growth in the early childhood years, certainly, and also always important. But for these young children especially, animals are so forgiving, for one thing, and that helps. But they're also very expressive with their bodies and their eyes, and so they can let you know when something's wrong. And we use that every day to communicate with the children about listening with your eyes. What are they telling you with their body? When the alpaca has her ears back, she's letting you know she's not feeling safe, and you need to give a step back and give her some space. And, oh, I know that you want to touch her, but she's telling you she doesn't want you to do that, and we need to respect that because that's her choice. And so she has the right for that to be respected. So we talk a lot about that with the children. And these experiences with the different kinds of animals also help the children be able to transfer that to people. Just having those really authentic and gentle experiences and conversations, where when you're having those conversations in childhood with other children, they can be a lot more emotionally driven, and it's hard to actually learn as easily as it is from these animals. So, and it's also a beautiful thing in building their confidence and competence too, and their abilities, because they start to learn, like, oh, he's letting you hold him, he really trusts you, or, you know, right now they just need a break, and that's okay. And then they come back, you know, in an hour or so, and the animal's okay and wants to interact. So there are just so many valuable experiences in the social emotional growth of children, the intellectual growth, of course, and like you said, science, of course. They're learning about the life cycle. They're having so much sensory input and experience. It's so incredibly valuable. The sounds of the animals, it's so beautifully stimulating of the senses. And then there's so many different fibers and scales and those types of things. And so that sensory input is very valuable for the children, being especially that they're sensory learners, you know, that all learning, the skin is the biggest organ in the body, and so much of that learning in those early years is through sensory input and stimulation. So all of that. We also can't discount the incredible value in, now that we have the fiber animals, the science and art experiences going through those experiences. We've now taken the fiber from the alpacas and the wool from the sheep and been able to, after shearing here at school where the children get to visit and watch that, then we're able to clean it, card it. The children in our oldest grades, our collective, the homeschool hybrid we have here, they've taken it further and done natural dyeing for months and months, and then applied the natural dyes of their choice to dyeing the fibers, and used them for felting, and then spun them into yarn, and then used them for weaving and crocheting and other fiber crafts and things, handwork that they do. And that's important to us because all of the richness of these things we need in the world come from the earth, from the gardens, from the animals. And so for us to really instill in authentic ways in the children, that's important to know where things come from so we can appreciate them, and then also have that incredible sense of accomplishment of look what I was able to create that's useful and didn't exist before, and to become contributors in the world instead of just consumers. Consumerism and the way that attacks our children is just so concerning. And yet to have these moments and these real authentic experiences that say, really, life isn't all about taking. It's also can be about giving and creating things that are helpful and useful. So you just can't underestimate really the value of having animals in the lives of children. The responsibility. We should talk a little about that, right?
Yeah.
Like they have some responsibility in cleaning habitats and helping with the animal yards when they get older and feeding the animals and noticing when they need something. And they so naturally, another thing, even if animals as pets is one category of animals in the classroom, but critters outside and the experiences of creating habitats for our animals and talking about what they need, we also apply that to the critters they find outside.
Sure.
So if they find a small snake, or they find bugs that they want to keep, etc., we help them to create habitats for observation for a little while and then release them back into their natural space. But you see these children who've helped care for these animals know, like, oh, they need some of this and they need some of that, and let's get them some water. And so it's really a beautiful, rich learning experience all the time.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about, well, first of all, some people might be thinking, who takes care of those animals on the weekends, summertime? And we are really blessed to have an awesome learning community that all pitches in and helps. But talk a little bit about that.
Well, like I think you mentioned earlier, we've grown to have this many animals, and that process alone has been a beautiful thing. But we do have a gardens and animal teacher here, and that's been part of being able to grow the number of animals we have here. But we also do have a community of parents who pitch in once a month. A group of parents comes and does a deep clean of all the animal yards outside, and also helps work in other areas of the outdoor environment here. We do have parent volunteers who are amazing and wonderful and will often come feed on holidays or weekends. And in addition to that, we've had the great blessing of being able to hire an older child, a teenager, late teen, to come, and he comes and we've paid him, and it's part of his job. He comes on the weekends, he comes when we have holidays, etc., and he feeds and looks after all of the animals. And that's the consistency is really important for animals. So that's something that we value, of course, in respecting them and caring for them well. And we've been able to do that in a variety of ways. But the garden and animals teacher coordinates all that, make sure they're always cared for, that they're always ready for hot weather, cold weather, supporting the teachers in the classroom when they have questions or need something.
Yeah, and we send them home with teachers or families for spring break, different holidays, summer break.
The indoor animals.
The indoor ones, yes. Yeah. So everyone has a chance to have that pet in their home for just a little bit.
Which
is beautiful. They can send it back. Yeah.
And then they get to send it back, and the parents really enjoy that. The parents who take advantage of that really do enjoy it, and it's really sweet. They have text groups and things, and they send pictures in their text group of the animals playing or eating or what have you. So it becomes a community effort always. That's important.
So we've talked a little bit about the benefits, social and emotional development, the science curriculum, learning how to nurture and care for animals in nature as well as our own pets. Let's talk about one drawback to having animals that some people might be hesitant to dive in and give it a try is...
In the classroom?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the classroom and at home, parents might think, well, the lifespan of that animal is only 2 to 3 years. Yeah. And I don't want to bring that home or into the classroom just to have it die. But
that's so valuable too. That is really an important part of having the animals, and something that you do need to think through. So I'm glad we can help you get there. But, death is inevitable. It's part of living. And one of our goals is to help the children and the families learn how to walk that journey of death in a beautiful way that can bring healing. And so we actually acknowledge the death when that happens with the children, and we have a funeral for the animal. And I can give you an example. We had a dwarf rabbit here. Sorry, that was a lion head, and Snickerdoodle was here for a really long time. So we had lots of children who loved Snickerdoodle because Snickerdoodle was very docile and been here for a lot of years. And so when Snickerdoodle died, it was a campus-wide sadness. And so we held Snickerdoodle and put Snickerdoodle's body in a box and put a little cloth there, and the teachers just sat in the class, in the outdoor areas, outdoor classrooms with the children, and they could come up and look at Snickerdoodle. They don't usually touch them, but if it's okay to touch them, they ask, then the teachers will, let them do that, and then have them go wash their hands, of course. But just talking about what dead is. Children don't really even understand, they don't understand at all the permanence of death, what it means for something to be dead. So these introductions into that and gentle ways. And so they do that, and then after a few hours, we'll have a funeral. And when we do that, we gather around in a circle and put Snickerdoodle, or the animal, in the center of the circle, and we all hold hands, and we talk about the fact that Snickerdoodle has died, and anybody who wants to share something about Snickerdoodle can do that. So the children say things like, "Oh, Snickerdoodle, you had the softest fur." And then we all sing in unison, "Goodbye, Snickerdoodle, goodbye." And then someone else will say something, and so we continue doing that. And then once everyone who wants to, contributed, and even if they say the same thing over and over, we just sing the chorus after each one, so that they're able to, number one, express how they're feeling about this, and also start to process what this whole thing is. And then we pray together, and every time we send an email to the parents, and we say, "Snickerdoodle died today, and this is what we did," and we give them some tips and language for talking with children about death and dying. And one of the most beautiful things about that is that we always hear back from parents thanking us for taking the children through this experience and in a way that they can begin to process it. Often we'll hear, "Our cat died 5 years ago, and our child still talks about it all the time." Or, "Our fish died last year, and our 3-year-old asks about him every single day." Well, that's because they don't understand what it even means, and they're trying to figure it out. And these experiences are valuable because the animals also become part of your life. And so you need to have a place to grieve. Some of the children cry, and it's really hard for them. Some of them are just really confused and might respond in a way that other people might think is inappropriate, but it's really not inappropriate. It's learning how to deal with grief, and so many of us don't know how to do that.
Right.
So many of us struggle with that season of life that is dying and death. So these experiences are really rich and valuable.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why it is so important to take the time to walk them through that process.
Absolutely.
Then the next time it happens to them, they will have some experience with that and some knowledge about that.
Very important.
Yeah. So let's talk about the easiest animals to start with.
Okay. So I would recommend, of course, your situation and what you're able to handle where you are at home or in a classroom. I would recommend, for the easiest, low care, easygoing indoor animals, I would say snails. Get some Texas land snails. And Carolina Biological is, you can look them up online and you can purchase them from there. And they are a little expensive to ship, which I think is crazy because we're here in Texas and we actually have to order them. And they are actually environmental menace. They're an environmental menace. So you have to agree that you won't let them out into the wild because they will destroy crops and etc. So you're making a little commitment here. But they're the easiest things to care for. You put them in an aquarium with soil. You throw in some vegetables that are wilting and things like that, greens and such. And then you spray the aquarium every once in a while, and easy peasy. And to clean it, you just put on a glove, get a Ziploc bag We gather all of the vegetables that haven't been eaten and are getting yucky, throw them in that Ziploc, spray down the sides with water, wipe them with a paper towel, throw that away, throw away the gloves, zip it up, give them some fresh greens, and then make sure they have some water and you spray them a little bit. Here's the best part. So, well, the best part would be probably that the children love them. And you can watch them crawl around and they'll crawl on you, and you can make little things for them to crawl on, little apparatuses, use your imagination. But as far as caring for them in the summer, you can actually put them in a dark place like a closet, etc., and they will go dormant. So no care over those long periods of time. And then about a week before school starts, you bring them out, you spray them, you give them some food. The next day, you refresh their whole habitat, and they're good to go for months. And you want to refresh that habitat every once in a while. Easy peasy. And then the other one, hissing cockroaches.
Before we go into hissing cockroaches, one thing about these snails is it requires a lot of patience on the part of the child to wait for that snail to emerge from the shell to interact with it. And so to see the children sit and wait for an important reason, that's a great way to practice having patience.
And delayed gratification, self-control, respect, because the animal's not ready and you can't make it.
Right.
So, I'm glad you brought that up. Hissing cockroaches are really another great one. Again, not passing those biases on to the children. They love them and interact with them in beautiful ways. And they're easy. Dog food and a couple of carrots and a wet paper towel, and they're good. So that's easy. The other ones, guinea pigs are great if you're able to take an animal like that. They are stinky. I think guinea pigs, they're one of the stinkiest ones inside, but you just make a commitment to clean it at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day quickly, and you get a routine in there and involve the children, and they're pretty wonderful pets. They're just interactive and sweet and have such personalities.
And like to be held.
Love to be held most of the time, right? Another thing, and I think this is really important, we haven't ever gotten an animal without an alternate plan if they didn't work out. And that's not something that you do typically as at home with a pet. You take a pet and it's a pet for life and you do what you need to do, right? And that's valuable as well. However, we are in a setting where, number one, the animal needs to be happy and comfortable with the children. And if the animal just isn't, that would be cruel and unkind. So we always have a plan for rehoming them if we must. And you should do that as well. You should make a plan for rehoming them, and you should think it all the way through before getting one about how much the food is going to cost, where you're going to store the food, what the routine is going to be for cleaning it up, and what the plan is for when it dies. And that's one thing our garden and animals teacher has been responsible for and done a beautiful job of. Each animal has a death plan. So, if a 400-pound pig dies, what are you going to do? Who do you call? Where do you go? What does that look like? So we have death plans for every one of our animals as well. So when the time comes, we can go to that resource we have online that is Shared Drive, and we can look it up, and we know who to call, what to do. It's important to have all that laid out.
Yeah, before you make a commitment.
Yeah, a dwarf bunny can be a really sweet indoor pet if you have enough room for an appropriate cage for that. And the ones that I don't recommend for classrooms especially are the ones that are nocturnal. It's hard when you have a hedgehog or a ferret, or I'm not a fan of ferrets myself. I'm sure, see, nothing wrong. Nobody would ever know that but you guys. But yes, those nocturnal animals, because you're really disrupting what's natural for them. And we have had hedgehogs, and they can be really sweet when they're handled well, and they're really cute. But when it was time for them to move on, actually one of them moved on to live with one of our teachers because of that. It was nocturnal and it was not adapting.
Yeah.
And those actually were given to us. I don't think we didn't. We've had 2 different hedgehogs and we haven't bought either one of them. Yeah. So for those reasons, but those were kind of rescue animals. So, but yeah.
Rats.
I think, why don't you talk about rats?
I would love to. We had some children in the school and parents who kept telling us how great of a pet a rat was, and we waited and waited a long time, but last summer we jumped in and I had them at my house to help socialize them, and they are so amazing. I never thought I would say that.
Isn't that amazing? That's so wonderful.
But they're so smart and they love to be interacted with and held, and they're pretty easy. So that's one that I'd recommend too.
Yeah, and I mean, they're fancy rats. They're not like...
Not your average rat.
Not your average rat.
A fancy Dumbo rat is what we got. But
yes,
so
that's another
choice.
one. It's funny because my daughter, who's 28, she was really not thrilled when we got hissing cockroaches here, because the two animals she asked for growing up that I said no to were rats and hissing cockroaches, because they creeped me out. And here we have both.
Right.
We have hissing cockroaches and rats. And she's like, really, Mom? I can't believe it. But it takes a village sometimes, all of us, to grow. I've grown into it.
Right.
We've had to grow along with the children in these things.
Sure.
So
for sure. We're still learning.
Always. And
Yeah.
That's an awesome thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. I was trying to think what else outside. I think if you can get some chickens, which if you run a program licensed by your state, that's a little bit iffy with chickens with children under 5. But chickens are really sweet pets. Also, being able to put a rabbitat outside where the children can go into the space. So there's a fence around this huge enclosure. And then there's a fence there, and the children can go into the fenced yard, and the rabbits can come out, and they can hold them if the rabbits are up for that, and spend time with them in there. If you can do a space like that, I think that's a really sweet outdoor animal, as long as they're safe from predators and things. Yeah. So I think starting with the snails, the hissing cockroaches, the guinea pigs, always a winner. Also, an animal they don't interact with, but that we have absolutely loved, is a bearded dragon. They really have a lot of personality. I had no idea. When I was teaching in the classroom, and when I would lead gathering time, the bearded dragon was in that room, and as I was reading a book, he actually stood up on the aquarium watching every time I read a book. And as I moved the book to show the children the pictures, he would move with it up and down the aquarium, and when we sang, he would, I'm telling you, he joined along. So they're really a fun, you can't hold them necessarily. Mainly, again, that has to do with licensing. It depends with reptiles. But if that's the case, they're still really cool to have.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I love
So now we've talked about most of the benefits. Children need animals, need a connection to animals and nature in their life and in their days. So we encourage you to get started with that if you haven't already. Thanks for joining us today. Like this episode and follow us. Also, head over to savechildhood.org, where you can learn more about our 14 tenets that we believe everyone can do to save childhood. And follow us on social media.
That's right. All the things. Thanks for being here today.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. To learn more and join the movement, go to savechildhood.org.